So I decided to commission this research because we found that there was a lot of work being done on the Sustainable Development Goals and mapping them to mining and how mining could contribute to the achievement of at least some of the Sustainable Development Goals. But we found that there wasn't enough connection between the fourth industrial revolution and the possibilities of a circular economy and linking that to mining and to the Sustainable Development Goals. So the big picture here is that we're about to overstep quite a number of our planetary boundaries. And of course, those planetary boundaries are interconnected. If you overstep the mark on one, you don't know what the impact might be on the others. At the same time, we know that technology is one of the solutions we have to help us truncate the curve, as it were, of environmental degradation. And we want to move quite swiftly into a low-carbon economy. And the energy and transport revolutions will help to get us there. And by that I mean alternative forms of energy, renewable energy, the electric car. These are technologies that help us move towards a low-carbon or donut economy. If that is to be achieved, we know that mining and metals are not going to become less important, but more important. And the World Bank reckons that we're going to be mining probably double the quantity of minerals and metals that we have been until now. And so that means we have to have a clear roadmap for how to ensure that mining and the extractive industries contribute both to the fourth industrial revolution, and through that channel of providing new technologies helps us to meet some of the Sustainable Development Goals so that we do not overstep these planetary boundaries that we are now at risk of really imperiling. So the main findings coming from this research, and you'll be able to find both papers on our website. Firstly, on the legislative front, there are really good laws in place, in South Africa especially, to govern mining and to govern the environment. And as far as mining governance and ensuring that the environment is well preserved and restored, our laws are among the best in the world on paper. And this is a typical South African problem. We have beautiful looking law on paper, but the management and the actual implementation governance of those laws leaves much to be desired. There are also management concerns, for instance, around who manages the process of environmental compliance among mining companies. And so one of the major findings from the legal governance paper that asks how a better extractive industry regulatory framework could contribute to meeting the SDGs is that the Department of Environmental Affairs really needs to take the lead on ensuring compliance with environmental regulations among mining companies. So it can't be, for instance, that the Department of Mineral Resources oversees environmental compliance, because they're the same entity that provides mining licenses. And so they have an interest in seeing as many mining licenses issued as possible. But what you actually want to see is rigorous oversight. And we're not convinced, and the paper argues that the Department of Mineral Resources should happily concede or hand that function over to the Department of Environmental Affairs so that we can ensure better compliance with environmental standards. The other paper concludes that technology really can help us ask better questions and get better answers from communities on this question of how we can build resilient communities. Mining affected communities are often suffer the brunt of mining work, and these communities often report that they aren't seeing the benefits from mining, but are living with all of the negative social and environmental externalities associated with mining. So for instance, they're the ones getting silicosis from breathing the dust from a mining town, and the social cost of that is huge to the nation and to those families. We don't know across the world actually how best to ensure that local communities really do benefit and do not suffer the negative effects of mining. Now, there's no substitute for relationships. Now, that's one of the big findings from this particular paper, is that technology, big data, artificial intelligence can help us get a better idea of how to serve communities, but there's no substitute for really knowing those communities well. So the advice here, and one of the concrete recommendations to mining companies and to governance entities, is that you have to know your communities very, very well. And you have to communicate with them long before a project even comes close to fruition. And you have to manage expectations, and you have to explain exactly how the whole process is going to work. Not once off so that you can tick a box, but repeatedly. The investment in relationship building is a long-term one. You won't have a lot to show for it initially to your shareholders, but in the long run, you want the community to so believe in the project that they build the road for you. You don't want to be in a position where you're providing corporate social responsibility projects just for the sake of ticking a box. That may look good on a brochure, doesn't look good in the eyes of the community. And so technology is our friend, but it's not a replacement for human relationships. And we think that this research is important at this critical juncture in history where we are on the edge of potentially imperiling our environment in terms of what environmental economists call irreversibility. You know, we are at risk of irreversible consequences to destroying the environment. Now, that also provides incredible opportunity for innovation. And we do see a world being completely transformed by new technologies. The fourth industrial revolution is a contested term, and yet it communicates something very important, and that is that new technologies are not only moving at a quantum speed, but they are also interacting. So we are going to live in a world that looks very different to the world we live in now, and yet there are still very specific concrete things that have to be done in order to supply the minerals and metals that make those technologies possible. Your iPhone needs titanium and cobalt and tin and copper. It needs up to 61 different kinds of minerals and metals. And so that means that if our iPhones are going to become a conduit for the Internet of Things, we're going to turn the lights on or off in our home through our smartphones, we want to know how that material is being mined, right? And if we're going to use our phones as means of keeping governments to account, we are going to want to know that those resources were responsibly mined and that they were mined in a way that was minimally invasive. And so we want technology not only to be fed by mining, but also to inform mining. We want to see a mining industry that is more tech savvy, and the mining industry is making huge progress in this respect. But that will also mean that mining offers fewer direct jobs, because automation is a reality. Automation is going to affect the availability of direct jobs for people and communities. However, good governance and having a clear development strategy will allow for mining to be a catalyst for growth in other sectors. And that's where mining industries really need to come to the cutting edge, as it were, of social development and understanding how to use tech to build social development. So that essentially means that mining can be less environmentally and socially costly, and it can create latent benefits, even if it doesn't create direct jobs in the way that it used to. Our stakeholders for this research are governments, policymakers, communities, and mining companies. And we think that the research is critically important for all of these stakeholders for one simple reason, and that is that mining and minerals extraction is not going away. And unless you have a clear development strategy, this is the part for policymakers, unless you have a clear development strategy, we aren't going to see a world in which mining and mineral extraction actually plays a positive role. We're going to see more holes in the ground with more upset communities. We don't want that. We want mining to be a catalyst in building a donut economy or a circular economy. And unless we understand how all the different bits fit together, we aren't going to be able to produce that kind of strategy. So the idea behind the research is for the research to inform strategy. And that's both on a big picture level and on a very nitty-gritty level. So there may be very specific changes to mineral and environmental law that need to happen in order to ensure that from a regulatory and governance perspective, we meet the SDGs, or at least some of them. And then at a bigger picture level, there may be new technologies we can harness to ensure that communities benefit more from mining and suffer less because of mining. So the research is important for the public, because the public also needs to be able to appropriate this information and use it to put pressure on governments to do the right things. Governments are conflicted by a number of competing priorities, and if citizens have this information at their disposal, they can hold government to account and say, look, we don't want you to destroy the water resources in an area where we're farming. And if your coal mine is going to affect our food security, we don't want that. And not only that, you're damaging the environment and you're pushing our planetary boundaries. We don't want that either. And so communities are empowered as a result of this research to hold governments to account. And we need that. We need a strong citizenry. All the research thus far shows us that unless you have a strong citizenry, you aren't going to be able to hold government to account. And that's when mineral resource endowments become a curse rather than a blessing for development.